Stretching for miles beneath some of the world's largest mountains, these tunnels are designed to overcome natural barriers and connect regions. Join me, I'm counting down 15 of the longest tunnels in the world. Number 15, the Taihang Tunnel. Stretching nearly 28 kilometers, the Taihang Tunnel is a mountain railway in northern China that traverses the Taihang Mountains. Made as part of a line that links the capitals of two northern provinces, it's led to massive efficiency boosts, and by some accounts, the time between the two cities has been reduced from almost 6 hours to just 1 hour. This is largely thanks to this tunnel and its high-speed trains, as they provide a quick, direct route that didn't exist before. Number 14, the Mount Erlang Tunnel. Located along the storied Sichuan-Tibet Highway, Mount Erlang Tunnel was a necessity. After all, around its local section of the highway, driving conditions were treacherous due to frequent landslides. 3rd of 2023, the 14.5-kilometer-long twin-tube tunnel cuts right through Mount Zagana. It's significant because it not only lies on a section of the ancient Silk Road, but it's also a symbol of development. After all, not only is it considered to be the longest tunnel of its kind in Europe, but also connects Turkey's Black Sea ports with the country's south. This has in turn increased its economic activity in the area. Number 12, the Ovid Tunnel. The Ovid Tunnel has been a long time in the making. The idea of traversing Mount Ovid with a roadway was first seriously discussed by the Ottomans in 1880, and in the 1930s, a highway was made to do just that. However, in 2012, work began on a tunnel to blast right through the mountain. Completed in 2018, it's an impressive 14.3 kilometers long, making it just a bit smaller than the Zagana Tunnel, and certainly a point of pride for the country of Turkey. Number 11, Zhongnanshan Tunnel. Wasn't cheap, but I'd say that it was definitely worth it. Number 10, the Frejus Rail Tunnel. Italy and France are important economic partners, and the Frejus Rail Tunnel plays an important role in facilitating that close connection. Headed by civil engineer Germain Sommelier, construction commenced in August of 1857. Now, at this point in time, both ends were within the Kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont. However, this all changed when Savoy was given to France in 1860. Despite this, construction carried on, and it proved to be quite the engineering challenge. After all, its gallery was twice the length of any tunnel previously constructed, and it was believed that it could take a whopping 40 years to tunnel through the 13 kilometers of mountain necessary. Yet thanks to new technologies such as pneumatic drills and dynamite, construction took just 13 years, and in September of 1871, the rail tunnel was open to traffic. This tunnel hailed a new era of cooperation between the two countries, after all, while close diplomatically. If you're an avid hiker, I'd suggest checking out the Strada della Cinquanta due Galleria, or in English, the Road of 52 Tunnels. It's located high up in the Dolomites. This mist-covered path has quite a history. Back in World War I, the tunnels were made at the foot of Mount Pasubio to act for a supply line for the Italian troops defending against the forces of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Built by Italy's 5th Engineering Regiment through the winter of 1917, they managed to carve out the trail in less than a year, which was no small feat given the technology of the time. But once all was said and done, the road came to a total length of 6.3 kilometers, with the 52 tunnels accounting for about 2.5 kilometers of that total. Now, in terms of design, the tunnels weren't just made for simple transport. After all, the path was made with several vistas and porticos, all of which were made to serve as defensive positions during heated fighting. But one of the most striking tunnels along the way is number 20. After all, it's carved into a stone tower in a corkscrew, and it makes for a good day trip. After all, it's about a 1.5-hour drive from Venice, and depending on where you begin, it takes between 4 to 8 hours to complete. Number 8, the Claudius Tunnel. Now, while the Claudius Tunnel may not be massive by modern standards, it earns a spot on this list due to it being the longest tunnel to be constructed in antiquity. It's a marvel of the ancient world. It was a pet project of Roman Emperor Claudius. You see, during ancient times, Lake Fucino was the 3rd largest lake in Italy, completely closed in by mountains. It was fed by snow meltwater, however, it proved to be problematic. The lake would often flood nearby villages, and when it receded in the summer, the exposed lake bed would create marshy conditions that helped increase the spread of malaria. In an effort to stem these negative effects, Claudius responded to local complaints by making plans to partially drain the lake. First dreamed up by Julius Caesar before his passing, Claudius resumed the ambitious plan with the help of substantial public financing. In essence, the idea was to drill a tunnel through Mount Salviano. Of the tunnel, the event ended in failure when it was discovered that the tunnel wasn't long enough. Well, that led to further excavations, and thankfully the second time was a charm, and the tunnel functioned as intended. While the tunnel was well maintained for years, eventually maintenance standards began to falter. After the fall of the Roman Empire and a subsequent earthquake, the tunnel was blocked off. It remained this way for centuries, with all local rulers who tried to fix the blockage failing due to lack of funds. However, in 1854, Alessandro Torlonia was commissioned to work on the project. He built a new canal that was over 6 kilometers long and largely followed the Clodian tunnel. The end result has functioned well ever since, and it continues to serve its intended ancient purpose today. Moving on to number 7, the Guoliang Tunnel. So across the world, there's no shortage of terrifying mountain passes, and the Guoliang Tunnel may take the cake for being one of the scariest. Its origin story begins back in 1972 and sure-footed of the villagers. Despite all the challenges though, 13 villagers, headed by their chief Shen Mingjing, decided that it was time to connect their village to the modern world. In order to do this, the group began selling their livestock to raise funds to buy tools and materials. However, the money they raised wasn't enough to buy power tools, forcing them to complete most of the construction by hand, with tools such as hammers and chisels. At the most difficult stage, the tunnel progressed at a rate of just 1 meter every 3 days. However, after 5 years, they managed to complete it. On May 1st of 1977, it was open to the public. Now at a length of 1.2 kilometers, 5 meters in height and 4 meters in width, the Guoliang Tunnel is pretty tiny. Really only large enough to accommodate one-way traffic. It's an absolute nightmare to drive on. Filled with many twists, turns, and dips in unpredictable places, it's famous for being a road that does not tolerate any mistakes. Even the slightest missed turn can end in just shy of 14 kilometers in length. It goes through the Arlberg Massif, and it's the longest tunnel in Austria. When first inaugurated in 1978, it held the title for being the longest road tunnel in the world. While it since has been surpassed, it's still impressive, if not somewhat dated. Costing a total of about 300 million euros, the tunnel has a pretty strong capacity. It's designed to handle 1,800 vehicles per hour, and it's equipped with 4 ventilation centers, 12 vents, 43 cameras for traffic monitoring, and 16 niches so cars can come off the road. All of this comes at a cost. After all, drivers have to pay a high toll of 11 euros just to travel one way. First opened to traffic in 1884, it was one of the premier engineering achievements of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, holding the title of being the longest railway tunnel in Austria for over 100 years. However, while its size was always impressive, it quickly ran into difficulties. First, it was originally built with 1 track, and soon this led to a massive amount of train traffic, and so a second track was added just 1 year later in 1885. And to this day, the train tunnel is still pretty important. After all, it still holds the title, being the only railway connection between the Austrian provinces of Tyrol and Vorarlberg. Number 5. The Raven Rock Mountain Complex. So while most of the tunnels on this list support roads and rail lines, the Raven Rock Mountain Complex is a bit different. That's because it serves not as a transport tunnel, but as a mountainous army base, and as far as bases go, it's pretty cool. Now let's get real for a second. If a nuclear World War III were to happen, the majority of you watching this video would be toast. However, the same fate would not apply to the President of the United States. That's because if disaster were to strike, he would be able to shelter with the other top political and military officials in a compound known as the Raven Rock Mountain Complex. Located high up in the mountains of Pennsylvania, it was approved by President Truman in 1950 and built between 1951 and 53. Nicknamed the Underground Pentagon, its tunnels and area space come in at a grand total of over 260 hectares. For reference, that's the equivalent of about 22.5 copies of the actual Pentagon. Of course, this leaves us with one important question. Has there ever been an event important enough for the Raven Rock Mountain Complex to actually be used? Well, while there haven't been any major nuclear attacks since Nagasaki and Hiroshima, 9/11 was pivotal for the compound to spring into action. While not all officials were whisked away there, Vice President Dick Cheney was housed in the complex away from President Bush, keeping them both separated and safe in case 9/11 led to a further string of attacks. Number 4. The Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel. The US is a country that's known for extensive road and highway systems. However, it's not as well known for train tracks. Yet, in a strange twist, the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel manages to be one of the few tunnels out there to concoct a mix of both. Located up north in the state of Alaska, rail and road travel to happen on the highway, and immediately it became North America's longest highway tunnel. To facilitate this new civilian purpose, a number of safe houses were built along the tunnel in case of wrecks or natural disasters. In addition, there's also a 1-meter-wide emergency sidewalk and emergency turnouts for vehicles. To maintain air quality in the underground tunnel, the high-power reversible jet fans are placed at each end of the tunnel, forcing fresh air through a series of vents along the road. Since the tunnel is quite small, a lot of coordination is required for it to work. After all, it can accommodate either eastbound traffic, westbound traffic, or the Alaska Railroad, but only one at any given time. This shared rail and road use is coordinated by two computer-based systems, the tunnel control system and the train signal system. They control the timing of vehicles entering the tunnel, spacing them for safety and allowing railroad gates when a train is approaching. Generally speaking, cars have about 30 minutes to go one way and another 30 to go the other, leading to a clean split. The only thing that really messes up roads and expansive fjords. It's not uncommon for vehicles to rely on ferries or mountain roads to get from place to place. For a while, the situation was so bad that in order to get between the capital of Oslo and the second biggest city of Bergen, drivers had to use a combination of ferry connections and mountain crossings. In total, the travel time was around 10 to 12 hours, depending on traffic. However, the current route is now just 7 to 8 hours, and a large part of this is thanks to the creation of the Lærdal Tunnel. It was built as part of a highway between the two cities, and construction began in 1995 and was completed in 2000 at a cost of $113 million. The main issues that engineers faced was the drive. After all, it takes about 20 minutes to get through the tunnel, and this created fears that drivers would lose focus during that time. And so in order to account for that, the government recruited a team of psychologists. They created a tunnel that has adjusted lighting levels, gentle curves, and short straight sections to make driving through the tunnel more interesting, while still maintaining a safe viewing distance. Lighting that gives off the illusion of driving into daylight. In these caves, visitors can also stop to rest, make a U-turn, or even have a wedding ceremony, as one couple has done. Beginning in 2025, there's going to be a 4-year effort to modernize the whole thing. The plan is for the tunnel to be completely closed for 14 hours each night for upgrades that will allow the cave to meet recent changes to EU safety. Number 2. The Gotthard Base Tunnel. In the past, moving through Switzerland wasn't all that easy. After all, the presence of the Alps has made getting in and out of the country pretty difficult, while Switzerland's frigid, cold winters can make travel absolutely treacherous. Now, in a way, this was a good thing. After all, having huge, nearly impassable mountains, more or less surrounding your country, makes invasions pretty difficult. However, in a world where another massive land war in Western Europe seems unlikely, the Swiss have prioritized making their country more accessible. The idea for a rail line first came in 1882 when a winding mountain coupled with the intense weight of the mountain above and the extreme temperatures and humidity posed a serious challenge. The 4 construction sites each had their own base camps with living quarters, cafeterias, and worker transit. Yet despite an intricate system, the construction was not without its risks. After all, 9 workers passed away in incidents during the process, with many more getting injured. Now, while the effort was gargantuan and the human toll significant, many would say the final result was incredible. Considered to be the world's deepest and longest underground railway tunnel, the Gotthard Base Tunnel runs for 57 kilometers and reaches a depth of 2,400 meters, making it comparable to some of the deepest mines on Earth. Since it's able to facilitate 160 km/h freight trains and 250 km/h passenger trains, traveling through the tunnel is a breeze, while its horizontal deviation of just 8 centimeters and vertical deviation of just 1 centimeter means that it's almost perfectly straight with practically zero uphills or downhills. Yet Italy has a great high-speed rail network, France has a great high-speed rail network, but despite being neighbors, the two countries' networks don't tend to intermix. Yet that is set to change. That's because in 2019, work began on the historic Montambim Base Tunnel. It's set to stretch for 57.5 kilometers. Once completed, it will be the longest rail tunnel on the planet, edging slightly ahead of the Gotthard Base Tunnel. Being built as part of the 270-kilometer-long Lyon-Turin high-speed rail, it will be crucial in linking the two cities. This specific section is set to cost €8 billion. It will also be part of a wider network of tunnels. The rail link has been a long time in the making. After making it onto the European Commission list of 14 priority projects in 1994, efforts were made to push the plan forward. In September of 2016, a key agreement towards the tunnel's construction was reached by France and Italy. 3 years later, tenders to perform the construction work were announced, and in 2019, construction finally started. The tunnel will be used by both. However, the new line has not been without its detractors. First and foremost, the project will likely take quite a while. An announcement in late 2022 set the expected completion date for the base tunnel to 2032. If that wasn't bad enough, ever since talks of the construction of the Lyon-Turin high-speed rail link began over 30 years ago, there's been no opposition to the project by residents of most of the 112 towns affected. The No TAV movement has witnessed protest, marches, active militancy, and has appealed to the highest courts in both France and Italy. But in Italy, most complaints surround responsibility. The project threatens to take over fields owned by local governments and cause rubble to be dumped close to nearby towns. Supporters of the No TAV movement also believe that certain mountains along the line, such as Mount Granier, should not be drilled through, since it's been the site of a lot of avalanches. They fear that drilling a hole in the mountain will make the avalanche problem even worse. Yet no matter what side of the dispute you're on,